Skyhooks!
Fire, ice, candy, and slime.
Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
After no new episodes for 2 months, Adventure Time is back with another new miniseries, titled Elements. This came out of nowhere. It was hardly promoted and didn't receive a DVD release or comic prequel. I don't think that anyone was expecting to get 2 miniseries almost back to back with only 1 episode in between, but the past 2 miniseries Adventure Time has had have both been highlights of their respective seasons, which were already pretty good to begin with. So I'm not complaining. I'll be going through this miniseries episode by episode, and there will be spoilers all throughout. Yes, I know that this came out nearly a month ago, but better never than late, right? Wait, I said that wrong. Anyway, Elements takes place almost directly after Islands. Finn and Jake and BMO have returned from their journey to Founders Island, and they now see that the land of Ooo has changed a lot since they left. From what they first encounter, everything seems to have been transformed into candy, including all of their friends. Part 1 of Elements, Skyhooks, is a slow trek through the new world the trio has come home to, and I really enjoyed it. It doesn't really hook you in like the beginnings of Stakes and Islands did, even though it actually has the word hook in its title. However, Skyhooks has a very creepy atmosphere and mystery to it. Everyone Finn and Jake seem to know have become delightful zombies, and they can't seem to find the reason behind that change. There's a small bit of mysteriousness to the episode that grows as it continues, and it crescendos into a good ending, where Princess Bubblegum is revealed to have turned into this huge spire of candy, and is about to turn Finn and Jake into candy before Ice King saves them. BMO wasn't so lucky though. Skyhooks also has a lot of really good banter between Finn and Jake. Finn is concerned and curious about what has happened, while Jake could care less and just wants to take a nap. Their arguing is really entertaining to listen to, and both of them get at least one good line in this episode.
But everything else is weird.
Wow, Sweet Pea, that's almost exactly what I've been saying!
So the second episode of Elements, Bespoken For, is a full-on flashback that tells us how the land of Ooo turned into the strong and divided elemental wasteland that it is now. But this episode has a trick up its sleeve. It's actually an Ice King episode. But unlike episodes like Wimple the Happy Dragon from Islands, which was an episode in a miniseries that hardly had anything to do with the main story, Bespoken For ties in its main story with the backstory we expected, and also sets up its recurring character themes. Ice King's equally crazy former girlfriend, Betty, returns here, and is still desperately trying to bring her beloved Simon back. Ice King is still oblivious as ever to his past, and thinks that this weird lady that appeared in his home just wants to take him out on a date. Ice King is another highlight of this miniseries. He sadly sits on the sidelines for most of the episodes, but all of the one-liners and character interactions he has are gold. Ice King is also the highlight of Bespoken For too, as we see him confusedly stumble through his date, never having a clue as to what exactly is going on. Betty learns to accept Ice King as he is at the end of the episode, even though she continues to try to change him throughout the rest of the miniseries. I could chalk up this inconsistency to Betty being generally nutty, and because she was frozen in a block of ice soon after coming to this realization, but it kind of feels like they needed Betty to have some kind of ulterior motive to help the heroes in the miniseries. Format-wise, this episode is also a strange detour from the rest of the miniseries. I enjoyed it, but like Marceline the Vampire Queen from Stakes, it feels like none of the other episodes, and slightly breaks the flow. But this was still a fine Ice King episode, and it brought back Tiny Manicore, so I would be lying to you if I said that I disliked it.
We're like 2 shadows, 2 ghosts, caught in limbo.
It sounds depressing when you say it that way. Think of a different way to say it.
Moving on, we learn that the ice elemental Patience St. Pim is to blame for what has happened to Ooo, since with Finn and Jake gone and Ice King distracted by Betty, Patience was able to unleash the full power of the other elementals, causing Ooo to look like a really weird 4-way pizza. Not only is this a good culmination of events built up in a few other episodes, but I also like how the only reason this happened was because Finn and Jake weren't around to stop it. Did this setup remind anyone else of the Powerpuff Girls episode Speed Demon, where the girls accidentally travel through time and see that the town was destroyed with them gone? That reference was likely unintentional, but I still think that it's a cool connection. The third episode of Elements is titled Winter Light, and has Finn, Jake, and Ice King traveling to the Ice Kingdom to find Patience and hopefully get a solution to their elemental problem. I think that this is a good time to talk about the art in the miniseries, which is hands down some of the best Adventure Time has ever had. The environments for each elemental zone are stunning and highly detailed. The ice zone, for example, is a giant dark dome, and seeing small glimpses of light shimmer onto the shiny ice makes for some really cool and almost space-like visuals. Most of the episode is spent with our three main characters traversing the zone, and it leads to some fun character interactions. However, this episode does feature a few strange inclusions that I didn't really understand. The group encounters the character Carol, who was last seen in the episode The Tower from Season 6.
Ice Carol!
Even though I really enjoyed that episode, even I didn't remember that character. Of all the side characters they could have chosen to appear here, why a character that appeared in one scene nearly 100 episodes ago? There's also a super random musical moment with some foxes, and a subplot with Jake getting transformed into an ice zombie that lasts for less than 2 minutes. I guess some of this stuff was added on to increase the episode's runtime, but I found most of it to be weird rather than adding to the story. I still enjoyed Winterlight for the most part, but some of these inclusions were very baffling to me. Anyway, at the end of the episode, Finn, Jake, and the Ice King finally find patience, but learn that she can't do anything to reverse her mistake. But Ice King does manage to rescue Betty.
Weird lady.
And she begins to help the guys after Finn gives her a second copy of the Enchiridion he somehow got when he was in the Farm World dimension, probably in the Season 5 premiere. This is a small plot point, but to me, it doesn't make a lick of sense. When did Finn have the time to do this, and how could he have known about the Enchiridion when using Prisma's wish reset his memories? Finn could have gotten it during the events of Crossover, but I feel that it's unlikely that could have happened either. There was an Adventure Time spin-off book that was partially a version of the Enchiridion. The book said that it was a reproduction of the original Enchiridion, which is all that this episode needed to say. It did not need to reference an event that probably didn't happen. If they just said that it was a copy, I would have understood that, and I wouldn't have had to spend the past few minutes complaining about this very small plot detail. Jeez, I feel like Mr. Enter now. Anyway, in the 4th episode, while Betty and Ice King are trying to find a solution, Finn and Jake end up on a cloud in the middle of nowhere. The episode Cloudy is just Finn and Jake talking to each other, and revealing their feelings about what is going on. It's nothing but pure character interactions, and because the characters have so many interesting things to say, it makes Cloudy one of the highlights of the miniseries. I do have one tiny problem with this episode, and it's that John DiMaggio and Jeremy Shada sing terribly here.
Time passes like a little cloud, my friend, but don't be cowed, my friend.
It's interesting to note that this episode was originally a scrapped Season 1 episode, and the beginning of it actually uses storyboards from that scrapped episode drawn years ago. However, I feel that this episode is much stronger as a part of Elements, rather than a normal episode, because it allows the episode to focus on a few specific topics that the audience is sure to know about if they watch the past few episodes, and it helps make Cloudy a standout of the miniseries. The next 2 episodes kind of follow a formula. Betty says that the only way to save Ooh is to gather the 4 Chaos Emeralds, MacGuffins, I mean Elemental Jewels, and unite them together. Then that means Finn and Jake need to travel into the remaining 3 zones to find the rest of the jewels. Episode 5, Slime Central, has Finn and Jake finding out that the Slime Kingdom has become one big party at a skate rink, with characters forming skate teams and winners and losers being assimilated into the now ginormous Slime Princess.
Isn't assimilation amazing?
I enjoyed some parts of this episode, like moments with Lumpy Space Princess and how Party Pat is now a passive-aggressive greaser.
Snack pack. More like stink pack.
But I feel that the episode doesn't get a ton of humor from its very 1980s style, and I feel that it may have been a bit better if a different setting was chosen for the Slime Kingdom. The design of the skate rink itself isn't even that interesting, especially compared to the bumpy and abstract look of the Slime Kingdom we see before Finn and Jake enter the rink. I still enjoyed Slime Central, but it was a bit of a missed opportunity in my book. By far the most interesting part of the episode is its ending. When attempting to retrieve the Slime Jewel, which is inside of Slime Princess, Jake lets himself get too relaxed, and is assimilated into Slime Princess while Finn is left on his own. I guess it kinda serves Jake right, as he was a little bit too relaxed and arrogant about the mission.
It'll work out somehow.
Actually, his behavior reminded me a lot of Samurai Jack in a recent episode from his show.
I'll find a way. I always have.
Anyway, since we already saw how strong the bond between Finn and Jake is, and how important it is to both of them earlier on in the miniseries, it makes their separation a lot more powerful. It also gives Finn even more of a motivation to collect the gems, since it may be the only way for him to see his friend again. Also, Lumpy Space Princess is also tagging along for the adventure, but more on her later. Finn and LSP travel to the Fire Kingdom in the 6th episode, Happy Warrior, which is one of the better ones. To start, the Fire Kingdom has by far the best visuals of all 4 zones. The landscape is made out of gray and black blobs that twist and turn all over. It's a huge change from the Fire Kingdom that we're used to, and it helps show how different everything is. The kingdom has turned into a war zone, with everyone, including characters like Wyatt, Tree Trunks' ex, and Flambeau, who now looks like this, constantly engaged in combat. Flame Princess has even become a dragon, with her jewel being stuck in her teeth. There's a lot of great action in this episode, and I especially love how it just flows from one battle to another. It also grows and grows as the episode continues, up until Finn and even Gunter have been corrupted by the growing violence. Unlike the last episode, Happy Warrior doesn't end with Finn and LSP moving on to the next zone. It instead ends with Finn, Gunter, and the citizens of the Fire Kingdom still corrupted and now in pursuit of taking down the Candy Kingdom. I'm glad that this miniseries decided to break from the formula it was beginning to establish. It caught me off guard and I found it a nice change. Sadly, the next episode, Hero Heart, isn't the best. It has a very slow start with Lumpy Space Princess, who has been weirdly unaffected by all of the elements, along with Betty and Ice King trying to break Finn and Gunter out of their flame-induced funk. Their interventions have no effect on the plot, and the way that they are reverted back to normal is by coming in contact with some gum from Princess Bubblegum. I like the idea that one element renders the effects of another useless, but that idea is pretty much dropped right after being introduced here. Outside of some pretty amusing fight scenes, though I would put the word fight scenes in air quotes, the only other thing to note about this episode is how Princess Bubblegum transforms everyone who isn't an important character into candy. I guess it's now clear that PB wants to have everything under her control, which is a neat exaggeration of one of her known characteristics, but it didn't really raise the stakes of the miniseries much. Although I did find the song that she sang at the end of the episode to be very creepy. I can't really blame Hero Heart for not being the best. It had to end what was left over from the previous episode and set up the final episode. There was so much that it needed to do, and there wasn't a ton of time left in between, so it caused the episode to be just okay. But now we arrive at the finale, Skyhooks 2. We find out that Betty was lying to Finn all along and that she was planning to use the royal jewels to create a time portal to stop Simon from ever finding the crown in the past. Betty ends up causing an explosion that writes her out of the episode, while Finn tries to figure out how LSP has been able to go through all 4 of the elemental zones and remain untouched by their powers. It turns out that because of her having origins in another dimension, Lumpy Space Princess is actually the anti-elemental, and the key to stopping the elemental takeover of Ooh. Honestly, I really like this twist. Lumpy Space Princess has always just been an annoying and weird person, just kind of like all teenagers. She hasn't really contributed to any of the main plots in the series, so I find it pretty funny that she was the solution to one of the biggest events that the show has had so far. But what makes this resolution really work is how LSP's elemental powers have been foreshadowed and briefly mentioned all throughout the miniseries.
Been in like all 4 zones without a scratch.
Huh, that's weird.
It makes the resolution feel earned, and not just something that the Adventure Time writers pulled out of thin air, though they already did do that in this miniseries. While it does wrap up maybe a bit too quickly, the end of Elements is pretty satisfying. Even more than Stakes, I would say, since it didn't feel like the show really wanted to hang on to the status quo. But I still didn't find it as good as the emotional gut punch from the end of Islands. There is just one more part of plot that I want to cover here. Finn and Jake finally reunite at the end of the final episode, and Jake looks like this.
Oh my god, you guys! Drama bomb!
At first I was very confused as to why this had happened, but then I started to remember a few things. In the prologue to Elements, Orb, a creature that vaguely resembles what Jake becomes, appears on screen for a brief moment in Jake's dream, and that same sort of creature also appeared at the beginning of Stakes. I'm not sure if these monsters are connected, or if they have anything to do with Jake turning into a rejected Ben 10 monster, but if any of these connections were intentional, then this is some very well done foreshadowing. As of now, no more new episodes of Adventure Time have aired, so I'm not sure if the introduction of this thing that Jake is now was a good idea or not. But to be completely honest, I'm not sure what to think about Elements as a whole. It's harder to rate the quality of this miniseries compared to the others, as there are so many things I both like and dislike. I really enjoyed the unique and visually remarkable setting, Finn and Jake's strong relationship, Ice King's dopiness, and the resolution. I think that the strongest parts of Elements were the characters and their interactions with each other, and I think that it's those that made the miniseries very fun to watch. But I still had a few small problems with it. I thought that Betty's motivations were a bit confusing, and she probably could have been cut from the miniseries altogether. I wasn't nearly as emotionally invested as I was when I watched the other Adventure Time miniseries. However, Elements didn't try to be a huge backstory-driven epic. It lowered the scale and was just a big fun adventure. Sure, a few things could have been better here or there, but as a whole, I enjoyed this miniseries, even more than Islands at times. I give Elements a score of 7 out of 10, and would recommend it if you're a fan of Adventure Time. I wouldn't go too far out of my way to see it, and I would probably watch Islands over this just because of how rewarding its payoff is, but I still think Elements is worth your time too. And since it's kind of become a tradition in these Adventure Time miniseries reviews, it's time to rank all of these episodes from worst to best in my top 5 Adventure Time Elements episodes. Number 5, Winter Light. Number 4, Skyhooks 2. Number 3, Skyhooks. Number 2, Happy Warrior. And number 1, Cloudy. Also, before I end this video, there are 2 more things related to Elements that I want to mention. Firstly, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the episode Orb, which, as I said before, is a prequel to Elements. It foreshadows the events of the miniseries by showing the dreams of Finn, Jake, and BMO, which are intertwined due to the involvement of some kind of nightmare princess. This premise should sound familiar, since the plot is basically identical to the Season 4 episode King Worm. I love that episode for its extreme weirdness and unpredictability, but Orb instead focuses its efforts on vague symbolism and not much else. It feels like it has so many interesting things to say about each of the characters, but they are shrouded in nothing but strangeness, and that almost makes the analysis videos about this episode found on YouTube necessary to enjoy this episode. I've had this same problem with other Adventure Time episodes, like The Mountain, which I have called out before. Part of my dislike for these episodes may be a bit personal. I come into Adventure Time for a fun and sometimes emotional adventure. I'm not too into decoding all the clues and analyzing all the symbolism. Same goes for things that I really enjoy like Gravity Falls. But that show has great animation, stories, and characters along with its secrets. If you're the type of guy that loves looking into all that stuff, then you'll probably enjoy Orb. There are some moments of comedy that put it above episodes like The Mountain for me personally, but honestly, I didn't care much for it overall. The only other thing that I want to mention is that, like Stakes and Islands, Elements also had its very own intro. Once again, it is very well detailed and animated, although there were some bits of character animation that looked a bit off, like here for instance. I don't know if I'm the only one who noticed that, but it didn't take much away from what was a really cool way to start each episode. I really didn't mean to end this review by talking about the first thing you see in this miniseries. That happened purely by accident. It's odd how the end of this review kind of brought us back to the beginning of this miniseries. Hey, I guess I'm being both intellectual and lazy at the same time. This is a dream come true.
Just relax, lay about, or my fist will put you out. Dream, 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 dream. Take your time, but beware, there's darkness in the air.